Megan! My son wanted me to do that. What a difference a year makes. This is no moonfall. I have mentioned this movie a few times in some of my videos, maybe in live stream. I went into this film highly skeptical, you guys, because number one, it's January. Number two, it has astronomical critical reviews, like in the mid to high 90s. I kid you not. That made me suspicious because I've been burned so many times by high critical reviews. But I went into it cautiously hopeful. And I have to say, I enjoyed the heck out of this film. It was so much more fun than I thought it would be. Honestly, I mentioned specifically that I thought, it looks kind of, just very kind of negative about it. And it was fun. And I made a comment on Twitter a little bit ago. I said it's so funny because this one guy, he's like an official critic, but I follow him on Twitter. He has a YouTube channel and does reviews and everything. So he's one of the official critics. It's so funny because this guy, he loved Halloween Ends. I hated Halloween Ends. There was another movie he loved. Oh, it was Christmas Bloody Christmas. I hated that movie. So then I saw today on Twitter, he didn't like this one. He gave this one a negative. I think we just don't have the same taste at all. I'm just guessing. But I just thought that was kind of funny. It's like, that's the same guy that didn't like... Anyway, whatever. Okay, so what I mentioned on this thread was this movie succeeded where a film like Halloween Ends utterly failed. And by that I mean, so it follows a formula, right? There's this formula that's been laid down for many horror type movies. And it followed the formula, so you kind of knew what to expect. So nothing was a huge surprise, let's just say that. But the way it was put together, the way the story was told, was effective. It got its job done. You knew what you were going to see. That's what you saw. And I felt like they did a really solid job at presenting us this horror movie that we've seen before. Think like, let's say, Child's Play, except a notch above Child's Play with regard to the technical qualities of this film, because Megan was creepy. She was creepy. Now, she was played by an actual person. I don't know if Chucky was. Can't remember. But she was played by an actual person, but they had that whatever the face and I was telling someone not long after I got out of the theater that she was creepy because she had this, she moved almost human-like. Well, it was a human, but let's say, okay, it's supposed to be an AI doll, toy type thing. She moved in a way that looked human, but at the same time, the movements were off. So not quite human. And it was weird. It was unsettling. It was unsettling to see that. It was unsettling to see her facial expressions, the way she would tilt her head, the way she would flicker her eyes. And it was effectively creepy. Now, this film got a PG-13 rating. I remember seeing something about that recently, and I had forgotten, to be honest, I'd forgotten that it was PG-13 when I went in to see it. But this is a movie that I feel like didn't necessarily need a rated R rating to be a decent horror movie. Now, there were definitely some crazy kills in here, but what made this film so effective to me was just the psychological terror of this AI gone rogue, and the fact that she was very strong because she's mechanical and she can analyze and comprehend things and put things together. It's such a speed that's, of course, inhuman because she's not human, and it makes her a very scary nemesis to go up against. And also something that I felt like this movie did really well was it kind of, so there's also this underlying narrative or message in the film, or what I took to be sort of a message in the film about the, maybe, I don't know if, whatever, commentary on tech addiction, specifically tech addiction with kids. And when you're watching this, or when I was watching it, I saw definite parallels between the character in this movie who becomes very attached and addicted to M3GAN, like how a lot of kids today are so attached to their screen. And for many parents, it's much easier to just sort of push the kid off in that direction while they have to take care of other stuff, because this thing is like the substitute parent. It steps in and it fills time for the kid, keeps the kid occupied. You know where the kid is. The kid's over here and out of your hair, that sort of thing. And that was definitely stuff that was happening in this film. Now it's wrapped in a bit of a different package because the girl is not the daughter of the main character. She's her niece. Her parents got killed and she's watching over her. And so she's not really mommy material. She loves her niece, but it's hard for her to balance her work life because that takes precedence, and also dealing with the fact that she has this kid now she has to take care of, and not really exactly knowing how to make that emotional connection with her. And so she kind of foists her off on M3GAN, this prototype doll toy type thing that she's working on. So I felt like it did a really good job of showing us these, like, the upsides to the fact that we've got all this technology at our fingertips, and how beneficial that can be to children. Now, this obviously goes a step beyond because this doll's AI. She's very advanced. She can learn. She communicates with the child like a human, maybe even on a better level, because she knows all the right things to say to the child to help the child in her grief and that sort of thing. To me, it kind of showed the pros of this technology that a lot of children are dependent on these days, but also the downsides to that. And I felt like it did a decent job of leading up to seeing the terrifying reality of what it can mean if your child is too dependent on this thing. And then when you try to remove it from the kid, that doesn't go over very well a lot of times. And so I thought it did a really good job of showing that play out. This movie was about an hour and 40 some minutes, and I felt like for the most part it was very well paced. Like, we didn't get off to a lot of actiony horror type stuff. It takes its time building up to the point where M3GAN is very clearly a threat, which I appreciated that. And with regard to timing and pacing, there were only 2 times where it stood out to me that I felt like something had been edited out, or I felt like there needed to be more expansion of this particular thing. One of the times was, there's a point in the movie where M3GAN imitates someone's voice and their manner of making noises, like, let's say, whistling or whatever, but she hadn't heard that yet. And it seemed pretty clear that she had to have heard these things before she could mimic it. And so I felt like when it showed that, I have a feeling that we're missing a scene where maybe she'd been exposed to it. I guess your mind is supposed to fill it in that at some point she heard these things. But when it happened, it stood out to me because I don't remember there being a scene where she had been exposed to those sounds before. So that was just one little kind of, oh, wait, that I think they cut something out. There was another thing where the main character, gosh, and I can't even remember her name. She's a chick who played in Get Out, but she is on this time deadline, and it's like very crunched for time. If I remember right, it was like supposed to be the next day, or she had less than a week. She only had like a day or two, or maybe barely a handful of days to get some particular thing done, and she manages to get it done. Like that felt a little bit too time crunched. But those issues, very minor to me and not enough to really affect my enjoyment of the overall film. I appreciated this a lot. It's classified as a horror comedy. There were moments of comedy in here. There was maybe only one or two times where I actually chuckled out loud. So it wasn't like, I expected it to be funnier when I saw it labeled as a horror comedy, but it wasn't hilarious to me. I don't feel like it leans as much in the comedy category as maybe the horror or thriller suspense type category. There were at least 3 times. In fact, I almost opened up this review by mentioning something along the lines of, well, I didn't know this was supposed to be a musical too, because there were at least 3 times where M3GAN broke into song. It was like, what? Maybe those were supposed to be some humorous moments. And I remember I was kind of like, what? But it didn't come across as overly silly. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of musicals, but when she broke into song, it was that it came across as a little bit more eerie than anything else. And yeah, that stood out. What else something else with regard to, the typical sort of way a horror story goes. You've got a person is suspicious there's something in the house. And as they're traveling through the house looking for this thing, they don't bother to turn on any lights, even though at some point they had said something to their, what is it? Like Alexa or the smart whatever things that you can tell it to turn the lights on, and whatever. Something is said to that machine about turning the lights on, and it doesn't happen. But then the character proceeds to not make any effort at all to turn the lights on as they traverse through this dark house, thinking there's so it's like, turn the dang lights on. Those sort of horror trope type stuff that happened. And of course, something that happens at the end that is like, oh, okay. But to me, it honestly was not enough to negate my overall enjoyment of this film as a whole. And I definitely would not mind watching this again. I would not mind adding this to my and it surprises the absolute heck out of me that this movie was as fun as it was. I mentioned in my out of the theater reaction that I left the theater with a big grin on my face, and I did. My son was waiting outside because he works at the theater. He was waiting outside because they had to go in and clean that particular theater when it was done. It was the 5 o'clock showing, and he was waiting outside, and some of his coworkers were there too, waiting to hear what my impression was. And I couldn't help it. I had a big grin on my face, and I think it was probably because I was so happy that it was enjoyable and that it was a completely the opposite type of experience that Moonfall had been about a year before. I started off 2022 with a terrible movie experience in the form of Moonfall, and I felt like that spelled doom and gloom for 2022. And in a lot of ways it kind of did, because I really wasn't overly wowed with a lot of films that came out. I mentioned that I had a harder time putting together my top 10 favorite films of 2022 than I did my top 10 worst films of 2022. But I am so happy that this movie, first week in January, gets started off to a decent beginning. And I'm hoping that this is going to be a sign of good things to come in the movie world for 2023. So I'm going next week to see some other horror movie, and I'm toying with the idea of also going to see Plane, but I'm not sure. I'm a little crunched on time, so we'll see. Plane looks like your typical generic sort of action adventure type film, but maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised by that as well. This looked like your typical sort of horror robot AI rogue thing, whatever, Chucky Child's Play type thing, you know, like basically, oh, something I've seen before. What are they going to do that's going to be new and different? There's nothing necessarily stunningly new or different about it, but it's just, we were given a very solid package, a solid story, solidly entertaining story, to me anyway, and I am so happy about that. Anyway, yeah, give it a go if you're interested and let me know what you think. It'd be kind of funny if, you know, y'all go and watch it and then you come back and you're like, I hated it. It was terrible, but maybe not. Okay. I don't think I have anything else. I'm looking through the rest of my notes and I don't have anything else. Oh, geez. Oh my gosh. Ew. Arturo had a workplace accident today. He fell. And he's got a very skinned up elbow. Ouch. Okay. I'm going to sign off. Bye for now.